Hello and welcome. You're watching Oneindia News. This is Global Chit Chat, our weekly show where we speak about geopolitical sphere and the development in the geopolitical sphere in the recent weeks with our expert, Mr. Tridivesh Singh Maini. Hello, sir. Welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much. I would like to wish you and the viewers a very happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali, sir, and also happy Bhai Dooj.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Sir, speaking about Indian traditions, here we have an Indian origin Prime Minister in UK for the first time, and Rishi Sunak is the fifth UK Prime Minister in 6 years, and I think he's the third to enter London's 10 Downing Street in like 3 months. So that clearly exhibits an instability in both the political and economical sphere in the UK. So what do you think is going to happen in the entire political sphere in UK? Because this was not the case before 6 years. This UK was not this politically unstable. But why do you think that this is happening at this current point of time? And how do you think that it's going to affect its both internal and external politics in terms of UK politics?
Okay, so I think that's a very pertinent point you've raised about, the number of prime ministers who've changed. And I think in that sense, obviously it was after Brexit, this whole confusion started off from, right? Now, couple of things. Just firstly, I think I would like to bring in, I answer your second question with regard to external factors. Now, there is a lot of talk about, obviously, and it's understandable that the first Asian PM, and in India, there has been a lot of talk about, his origins. I mean, the fact that he's of Indian origin. Ultimately, obviously, I mean, this is clearly an indicator of the fact of it's a clear reiteration of the point that the diaspora is now beginning to assert itself in public life as well, right? But there is a need to be realistic in expectations. So just, I mean, so basically, obviously, for him, he's the British Prime Minister. He will give precedence to the interests of Britain. So that is that point. I thought that needed to be addressed because a lot is being said about that. Now, even if you see some of his appointments, for example, he's appointed the Home Secretary, made a very sort of the remark which basically many people say led to the collapse of the UK FTA. So that is one thing which you need to bear in mind. Now, coming to, I think, the very challenging times, and once the euphoria is over, there will be a realization of the ground realities, which is domestic economic challenges. I think it's going to be really bound on domestic economic challenges. So, and obviously, economic policies, the foreign policy part is going to be linked essentially to economics right now. So that's why we spoke about diversification and looking beyond the European Union. That is why, in fact, one of the reason why UK was going for a lot of FTAs, even in Asia. I mean, if UK India FTA, which was to be concluded, is one of them. You also have UK has been looking at FTAs with other parts of Asia. So I think as a result of economics, there will be a lot of priority on FTAs with Asia. That's the foreign policy context. Domestically, it is not. Again, I'd like to reiterate the challenge. I mean, if you look at the fiscal situation, if you look at the handling, if you look at the political instability, you see a lot. Even when you're dealing with economic issues, a lot is about perception. Now, political instability does not send out. I mean, neither does it send out a very sound message to investors domestically and obviously even outside. So, like we're talking about the fact that over 6 years you had like five prime ministers. So there has to be a perception of stability. Now the catch 22 is that the problem is that stability can only come in when you can make some bring about some perceptible changes in the economy. Now that takes a bit of time, and that requires a lot of risks, which not every political leader is willing to take. So I think it's challenging times both domestically and as far as foreign policy is concerned, it's secondary. It's linked to the economic interests. So As such, I think now in a week or in 2 weeks, a lot of things will, the ground once the new cabinet is there. Uh, there'll be an appreciation of the current situation. What are the things that can be done? What are the tangibles? That all is going to happen. And I mean, I don't rule out. I mean, you cannot rule out if within a particular period of time these issues are not addressed. You could have further changes. You could have instability. That is certainly
Right.
there. And I think, as I said earlier, also last week on last show, that it's also time for the Conservative Party to look, to do some, not just Conservative Party, the right all over, because this is in the short run, all this populism and everything, it helps you. I mean, if you look at the case of Brexit, for instance, but in the long run, it's problematic. So, uh, same thing is happening everywhere. So it's a wake up call, I think, even for the right, because you see how much of, again, if you look at the perception, it's not that Brexit has led to all the problems, but the perception is that the instability began after that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's time. The government will have it. The new government will have its own challenges, but the Conservative Party also needs to look inwards and look at various issues and whether everybody. I think the right, even in other parts of the world, whether they want to, as we had discussed earlier, also whether they want to follow the path of Reagan or whether they want to follow the path of Trump. That is something which certainly needs to be looked at. But I don't think anything. Any perceptible change is going to happen in terms of the economy, at least in the short run. And it depends really. I mean, people will also have to be very patient. Remains to be seen. And foreign policy, as I said, will be linked. And you could have, I mean, focus on Asia, which also obviously includes India, but Indo-Pacific. I think successively, previous conservative governments have been focusing more on the Indo-Pacific. Well, there has been some as a result of deterioration of ties with China. Greater priorities also being given to the Indo-Pacific, but that will be secondary for the time being.
Right, right. Moving on from the UK, let's come to the US, and a very interesting thing is happening. So, the US and the Saudi Arabia, the relationship between these two countries, it has apparently hit its lowest for the last quite a few years. But interestingly, there's a conference going on, and it's nicknamed Davos in the desert. It's being held in Riyadh, and many US executives, Wall Street executives, and wealthiest investors from the US, they are expected to show up and attend that conference. So can you just tell us what this entire conference is about, Davos in the desert, and can you just elaborate on that itself for our viewers?
So obviously, the blueprint for Saudi reforms. If you look at that is Vision 2030, there was a lot of emphasis on one, obviously in economic terms, to reduce the dependence upon oil, to look at new economic policies which are in sync with global changes, and as we have been discussing, I mean, we often discussed UAE. So obviously, UAE was beginning to upstage Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia wants to take a template out of UAE, US sort of approach in certain ways. And so one of that is obviously also promoting soft power, which includes not just economic reforms, but includes social reforms, giving some more rights, to women. So as you would be knowing about, women getting the right, they're allowed to drive, uh, participation in sporting events. So again, in terms of it's not that everything is obviously things take time to change, but in terms of addressing the perception, the West gets, when the West looks at all these reforms, yeah, the other countries, not just the West, I mean, I'm not talking about the West, different parts of the world, they all obviously think that a lot is changing. Now, this certain investors use this as a sort of to strengthen the point that Saudi Arabia is a favorite destination. They look at the reforms, they look at the fact that how Saudi Arabia is sort of trying to promote a soft power. That all is one part, and in fact, even in the soft power index, I think 2021 it rose significantly. I think it was number 24 or something in a soft power index. So that part about soft power we need to look at. Investment wise, obviously economic policies, infrastructure and all that in the last few years, number of positive changes have taken. I mean, all Gulf countries have good infrastructure. They have their own advantages, but that is nothing new. that new, but it's the overall vision about reducing the dependence upon oil and moving from that sort of paradigm to a new one. Now, what is also interesting, you very rightly pointed out that in spite of the tensions, you have big, top US executives, you have investors who are present at the conference. And what is also interesting about the conference is it's not only focused on economics. So it's focused on a post-COVID world as well, about the need for sustainable economic growth, uh, environmental issues, reducing disparities globally. That all is there. Ultimately, the aim of Saudi Arabia is obviously to change the perception and to attract investors. But all this is happening as well. To make, and this obviously falls under the overall objective about promotion of soft power, about sending out this image that we're not just focused on economics, about changing perceptions. And it's not just US. You also have delegates from Israel, from the second largest bank of Israel, which shows that how one obviously US-Saudi relations, in spite of the recent hiccups, they're clearly hyphenated from the politics, from the overall politics, even though some policymakers have called for taking stern steps and so on and so forth. But even with Israel, I mean, if you look at the Saudi the links within Saudi business community and Israeli business community, they're also trying to build strong, and you have air connectivity and all that as well. So they're trying to build economic links in Israel, and as a result of that, if Saudi-Israel links improve, then it's very tough again, for the US to really shape its foreign policy. So this is a very and this is I think any country would do the same. So what again I would come back to the same concept that essentially FIA is a very good example of smart power,
Okay, right.
harnessing your soft power, your reforms, about how you're bothered about global issues like the environment, about adhering to sustainable development goals set by the United Nations, at the same time promoting your interests, your economic interests and all, right? So something tangible. So that all is there. And I think all Gulf countries are doing it. And obviously, this is also important because for very long, soft power and smart power and everything, it was considered a monopoly of the US. Now other countries have begun to step in. So you have different models and you'll have a different trajectory, you'll have a different pace, all that is there. But so I think on the whole, it's quite fascinating. And even to see some of the, apart from the issues I've discussed, there was a great thrust on the changing world order, on geopolitics. I think one of the speakers, for instance, said that he's more concerned about the global geopolitics and the uncertainties, as opposed to the recession which is being predicted by many. So I think
Yeah.
on the whole, uh, there's a lot which is discussed, but these are some of the key factors I think.
Right, right. And also, speaking of recessions, let's come to China. China is facing a lot of economic challenges at this moment, because including its Beijing's zero COVID policy and trade conflict with the US. And shares of the largest Chinese companies listed on US exchanges tanked by as much as 25% on Monday. Now, all this comes against the backdrop of Xi Jinping securing his third term in the country. So, do you think that him coming back to power, rather him just sustaining on his post, do you think that he'll actually be able to counter these challenges, or do you think that China's future or economical future is looking bleak right now?
So I think the first thing is, if you look at the overall tone and tenor, it's not only about uh, iconization of Xi Jinping and creating him, making him into a larger than life figure and all that, but it's also about the fact that the firm defense of the policies which have been adopted vis-a-vis COVID-19, about some of the economic policies which many people believe are responsible for the slowdown. So that clearly indicates that it remains to be seen whether there will be a course correction. But also, if you look at the team, that you have three reformers. You have the premier, you have the vice premier, and you have the chairman of the Bank of China, the head of the Bank of China. Rather, sorry. So these three are being replaced, and they are pro-reform. and the people who are being brought in, they are not supposed to be that pro-reform. But I might add here that yesterday I think there has been a recovery. You were talking about Chinese stocks that are listed the US, right? Chinese companies. Now there has been, because they had fallen so much, and there was some course correction also, because I think China also, some of the policies which were introduced, I think a couple of days ago, China said that it will provide support to its companies, and in a move to send out the correct sort of message with regard to the domestic economy as well. Some measures have been taken that China is going to provide some sort of support to its companies, and this was a slight deviation from the policies in the recent past. So there has been a recovery, but the overall thrust, if you look at the changes, I think it's more about centralization of power. It's more about, again, we've spoken about how there is more of Mao and less of Deng, Xi Jinping. So that is also evident in these changes. And it really remains to be seen that currently you have the Xi Jinping's economic approach is different, the current previous approach is different. So there is a bit of a check. Like last year, even at the end of last year, some of the policies, some of the support which is provided to the real estate sector, to other industries, that was because of pressure from the Chinese premier and certain others who are pro-reform and who also believe that economic growth is essential. But if you don't have that, it remains to be seen, and it also remains to be seen as to what domestic, social problems it will lead to, what disruptions it will lead to. Yet, I would still say, okay, it's too early to say something, but there are certainly markers, there are certainly indicators that the thrust will not be on, GDP, economic reforms as it has been in the past. And as I said, it will be more on centralization of power. It may be more on aggressive foreign policy. Even though it was said, I mean, repeatedly, Xi Jinping spoke about, again, peace and global stability and all. But in actuality, the policies may just be the opposite of that. And if that is so, then there'll be further, global, there'll be a flux. I think one, obviously, China, the more there are economic issues domestically, you could have China become more aggressive outside.
Exactly.
So I think that's about it. That's how it.
Right. Thank you so much for all the information that you've given us today, and also thank you everybody for watching One India News. Catch us again for the next time on Global Chit Chat. Thank you for watching.